But there will be closing. But he doesn't know that.
Good morning, distinguished delegates. I hope you had a restful night as we prepare for our final day of work at this first session of the committee. Let's be efficient as we have been and positive as we finalize our work and prepare for INC-2. I would like to continue with our list of speakers under agenda item 4 on sub-item 5 on sequencing and recommended further work. We will hear back also from our co-facilitators on the informal group on the outcome of discussions in that group yesterday. So let us begin with our next speaker on sequencing and recommended further work. I have on my list the distinguished representative of Switzerland, followed by Peru and Turkey. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What a pleasure to make the first intervention today. Colleagues, we have a demanding task. We need to elaborate an international treaty with international binding rules in a very ambitious time frame. During this INC-1, we have the chance to present and hear views on a variety of topics related to the treaty. At INC-2, we will have to move into treaty-making mode, meaning going deeper into the substance and discuss possible elements on the instrument, in particular obligations and control measures throughout the life cycle of all plastics. The discussion should be based on the elements paper the Secretariat is going to prepare based on inputs from Member States and stakeholders. To facilitate the discussions, 2 contact groups should be established. Ideally, we can do this already today. The objective would discuss possible elements of the instrument. The groups could be structured as following. First, a group 1, that works on objective, scope, control measures and implementation, including national action plans. Group 2 could focus on means of implementation, institutional arrangements and other elements. We also support the call made by many others to support participation for countries in need with 2 delegates to assist at negotiations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Switzerland. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Peru.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. La secuenciación y agrupación deben abarcar los aspectos relevantes del enfoque del ciclo de vida completo de los plásticos, incluyendo las dimensiones de upstream y downstream, las soluciones innovadoras para abordar la contaminación por plásticos, incluida la contaminación por plásticos existentes en el medio marino, el cumplimiento de las disposiciones, los aspectos legales y el mecanismo financiero y los medios de implementación, así como la creación de capacidades y la transferencia tecnológica. Los futuros INCs podrían trabajar con dos flujos de trabajo en paralelo. El primer flujo de trabajo enfocado en las medidas que buscamos establecer y un segundo flujo de trabajo enfocado en los medios de implementación y arreglos institucionales. Es importante que el clúster de los medios de implementación y arreglos institucionales pueda iniciar sus sesiones de manera temprana, a partir de la INC-2, a la par del clúster de las medidas que se establecerán. Respecto a las recomendaciones a la Secretaría para el futuro trabajo, con miras a la segunda reunión del INC, el Perú desea que la Secretaría pueda preparar un documento con una propuesta completa de obligaciones comunes y medidas de control que podría incluir el futuro tratado. Este documento deberá incluir las propuestas que se han mencionado en esta reunión, así como las presentaciones por escrito que puedan hacer los Estados y otros actores relevantes después del INC-1. Solicitamos igualmente que la Presidencia se asegure que dicho documento pueda ser circulado con la debida antelación a todos los Estados miembros, en todos los idiomas oficiales, y convocar a las sesiones informativas en el periodo intersesional antes de la INC-2 a fin de presentar el referido documento a los Estados. Muchas gracias.
Agradezco a la distinguida representante del Perú, and I give now the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Chair. We are fully aware of the effective sequencing helps to overcome negotiation challenges. It's known that inappropriate sequencing is the basis of most of the problems encountered within the implementation phases. We would like to underline that the sequencing part is an important issue that needs to be thought through in order not to encounter any bad surprises later on. In order to enable us, who set out with the great goal of ending plastic pollution, to work on the subject in detail, is considered beneficial to address issues such as the creation of subgroups and the presentation of scientific resources as a base for studies as soon as possible. The issue of sequencing also arises in planning the entire application from start to finish, scheduling, funding and measuring effectiveness with reporting. I would like to express that we expect the sequencing issue related to intersessional meetings in INC processes to be resolved as quickly as possible and shared with all parties. We have no doubt that a successful sequencing will be prepared thanks to the guidance of the Secretariat on the subject as usual. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Turkey. I now will give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba, followed by Thailand and Canada. Cuba tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Cuba considera que el proceso de negociación debe ser inclusivo y transparente, para lo cual se debe tener en cuenta que las delegaciones de muchos países en desarrollo son pequeñas y están imposibilitadas de participar en múltiples grupos de trabajo sesionando a la misma vez. El interés de concluir los trabajos del INC a finales del 2024 no deberá socavar la calidad y participación de todos en el proceso. Consideramos que los grupos de contactos que se creen pueden ir bordando paulatinamente y por etapa las disposiciones del acuerdo. Para el INC-2 deberían crearse los dos primeros que traten los siguientes temas. 1. Objetivo, alcance, principios y obligaciones generales. 2. Medios y medidas de implementación. Ambos tipos de disposiciones cuentan con una estrecha relación entre ellos. Para las siguientes sesiones del INC se podrán tratar otras disposiciones. Muchas gracias.
Agradezco al distinguido representante de Cuba. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Thailand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Sawadika, distinguished delegates. Thailand would also like to echo guidance on priorities and possible way forward proposed by the European Union and distinguished delegates of Norway and Japan yesterday and Switzerland today. Thailand wishes to suggest to wrap up outcome of the first session of INC and to advance the works for the second session of INC. Thailand views that it is important to have in-depth synthesis and digestion of intensive and inclusive information, views, inputs, and guidance in which have been either expressed by in-session, physically and virtually participants, or contained in the pre-session written submission from member states and multi-stakeholders. In order to comply potential elements to be used to formulate substantive of the instrument text. We all experienced the time constraint during the negotiation in this INC-1 and foreseen that the intersessional work is needed, including but not limited to informal focus group meetings, regional discussion, and multi-stakeholder consultation to take stock in advance of key provision and substantive elements to be shaped and elaborated in pre-session documents prepared by the Secretariat in accordance with the further proposed agenda item of the next INC meeting. In INC-2, its potential agenda item would include the consideration of proposal on structure and key potential provision. Then the contact groups to cluster their works aligning with such proposed agenda item should be established at the INC-2. Nevertheless, we will end this now. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Thailand. I give now the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. We have an ambitious timeline to develop the legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, and as such, we need to be negotiation ready to discuss substance at INC-2. Canada wants an ambitious, robust, inclusive, and transparent INC process to develop the instrument, and this first meeting is the time to set the framing of those discussions and to put the path in motion for effective negotiations. With that, and building upon the provided report 1-5, Canada supports establishing two main clusters for organizing discussions at INC-2. This would be informed by a Secretariat report outlining potential elements in these areas. The first area of work to discuss objectives, control measures, voluntary approaches, and implementation measures, including national action plans and reporting. This area of work should address the full life cycle of plastics, consider the waste hierarchy, and discuss complementary upstream, midstream, and downstream measures. The second area of work to discuss the means of implementation, including capacity building, technical assistance, and finance, as well as institutional arrangements and other enabling elements. We could also support the creation of informal groups to facilitate these work streams. Recognizing the circumstances of smaller delegations, there should not be more than 2 parallel sessions at a time. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Canada. I will now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States, followed by Senegal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States looks forward to working with countries and others to chart a path forward on how to organize our work during the INC process. We need to move rapidly over the next 2 years. We have an important task at hand. We support the calls to ensure that we have sufficient participation at INC-2 and look forward to working with the Secretariat on this matter. We think it will be important to have clarity on the organization of our work moving forward, including how we organize discussions well ahead of INC-2. We look forward to the Chair and Secretariat helping us make efficient use of our time as we start detailed negotiations on the instrument. We encourage the timely posting of the INC-2 annotated agenda and scenario note that is informed by consultations with member states, reflecting on how we can improve from this INC. We welcome this early exchange on the views of potential contact groups and work streams, but we should not rush in to lock ourselves into a detailed organizational structure ahead of INC-2. We note that so far we are hearing very different views about these important matters. We agree with many other countries that our discussions at INC-2 should be based on the documents on potential options for elements towards an international legally binding instrument, which will be informed by input from member states and others. We need to review such information contained in the potential elements document ahead of making a decision on the structure of our work, which could include the number and thematic content of contact groups in INC-2. We agree with Japan and others that have noted it is premature to make a decision at this meeting about contact groups and the structure and content of such groups. We are concerned that in an attempt to set these details too early, we would waste precious time at INC-2, potentially working to change such a structure. We want to take an approach that strikes a balance between locking in the organizational future of our work and building in flexibility to adapt to the structure of our discussions based on the meeting documents submitted to INC-2 and discussions that have happened throughout this week. We would also like to raise the provisional agenda for INC-2. We are generally satisfied with the version that has been posted on the meeting portal. However, we would like to see INC-2 provide an opportunity for high-level engagement among countries at this meeting and in the future. We must maintain strong political leadership that is behind our work as we move forward in the negotiations. It is imperative that we bring this political commitment forward. We believe that a good way to do this is having a high-level segment at INC-2 that can continue to foster the energy and momentum that we have experienced this week to make rapid progress. We also think it is important to start building these high-level relationships that will ensure that we can finish the text of the new instrument by 2024. Therefore, we propose including a high-level segment on the provisional agenda for INC-2 as we kick off the substance of our negotiations. With regards to the multi-stakeholder forum at INC-2, we encourage the Secretariat to learn from the organization of the preceding multi-stakeholder forums and to continue to improve this model. We need to maintain a strong connection to the stakeholders that are impacted by plastic pollution and those stakeholders that will be needed to help solve this problem. We need to do this together. For this reason, we would like a high-level segment of the INC to be contiguous with the multi-stakeholder forum to enable crossover among leaders from the stakeholder community and from national governments. We think it is important for such a forum to include opportunities to showcase actions from regions most impacted by plastic pollution, bring to light technology and innovations that can help us solve this problem, and finally, give us greater insights on how we can work together. We have made progress at this meeting and we look forward to continuing it. In line with the views that we have shared in the informal group, we note that it is our expectation the Secretariat will enable the ability to have robust side events at INC-2, including the potential for a pavilion that enables participants to walk and understand the different actions that are occurring on plastic pollution, the technology and innovation that is out there. We need to learn from each other. Governments will not be able to solve this problem alone. We look forward to working together with all the member states and stakeholders to come up with the solutions that we need to protect ourselves now and in the future. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States. Maintenant, je donne la parole au représentant du Sénégal, suivi par le Cameroun.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour tout le monde. Ce message est délivré au nom du groupe africain par le Sénégal. Je vous remercie d'abord, Monsieur le Président. Le groupe africain attend encore des discussions sur les questions critiques de champ d'application des objectifs et de la structure du futur instrument. Sur le cycle de vie des plastiques, des discussions distinctes sont nécessaires sur les mesures conformément à la responsabilité commune mais différenciée pour, d'une manière compréhensive, adresser chaque étape du cycle de vie relativement à la résolution INEA 5/14. À cet égard, une délimitation raisonnable du cycle de vie des plastiques peut inclure l'approvisionnement en matières premières, la production et consommation des polymères vierges, la conception et l'utilisation de produits, la gestion et le traitement des déchets et le plastique dans l'environnement. En outre, et c'est important, les rapports nationaux doivent être discutés à chaque étape afin de déterminer le niveau approprié de détail et d'information pour déterminer les progrès et l'efficacité au fil du temps. De même, une discussion devrait avoir lieu simultanément sur la transparence, y compris la pleine connaissance des ingrédients des matières plastiques et la conception des produits durables selon des critères et des normes de durabilité mondiale et l'élimination des produits chimiques nocifs dans les plastiques, garantissant la transparence tout au long de la chaîne de valeur. L'INC devrait avoir une conversation sur les sources spécifiques de pollution plastique, notamment non limitées à ces plastiques, les plastiques agricoles, les emballages, les engins de pêche et différents microplastiques et les macroplastiques. Les autres formes de plastique comme les poussières de pneus, les textiles, nécessiteront des approches sur mesure. On peut imaginer que l'instrument lance des programmes de travail dédiés à ces sources de pollution plastique, éventuellement en tandem avec un programme d'action multipartite. Les moyens de mise en œuvre venant des pays développés vers les pays en développement devraient être discutés à chaque INC, y compris le mécanisme financier et les arrangements institutionnels. Les moyens de mise en œuvre adéquats grâce à une assistance financière supplémentaire et prévisible fournie par le biais du fonds multilatéral dédié créé à cet effet, ainsi qu'au remboursement des capacités et à l'assistance technique, y compris le transfert et le déploiement de technologies, devraient être adoptés. De même, les activités habilitantes, y compris la formation, l'établissement de rapports et le suivi, l'élaboration et la mise en œuvre des politiques, les coûts supplémentaires convenus et les projets pilotes de démonstration en réfléchissant sur des modèles de financement existants tels que le protocole de Montréal devraient être discutés. En outre, pour la question des déchets, les négociations devraient se concentrer sur la manière dont, grâce à des plans d'action nationaux et à ces financements concessionnels, une gestion écologiquement rationnelle des déchets plastiques peut devenir durable, notamment grâce à des régimes de responsabilité élargie des producteurs. Concernant les mesures de contrôle, des discussions devraient avoir lieu avec une réflexion sur certaines mesures dans des accords environnementaux multilatéraux similaires tels que le protocole de Montréal. Le secrétariat pourrait être requis de préparer un papier de politique sur ces aspects pour la discussion. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Je remercie les distingués représentants du Sénégal. Et maintenant, je donne la parole au représentant du Cameroun, suivi par l'Afrique du Sud.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de me donner la parole. Ma délégation s'aligne sur la position exprimée par le Sénégal au nom du groupe africain. À titre de commentaire national, mon pays s'attend à voir pour la prochaine session de négociation, en plus du document du secrétariat sur les éléments de contenu du texte, un document officieux du président. En anglais, on parle du Streamline Non-Paper, qui fixe les orientations du futur texte sur la base des discussions qui émergent à la fois du forum multi-acteurs et de la présente session de négociation. Nous souhaitons à l'avenir également la désignation des facilitateurs pour les thématiques qui pourront récapituler les travaux en plénière et faire par la suite des restitutions. Pour ce qui est des sessions informelles parallèles, ma délégation n'est pas très enthousiaste, mais pourra être flexible si le soutien est fourni pour la prise en charge d'au moins 2 représentants par délégation nationale des pays en développement. Merci beaucoup.
Je remercie les distingués représentants du Cameroun. I now give the floor to the representative of South Africa, followed by Guinea-Bissau and the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. South Africa aligns itself with a statement made by Senegal on behalf of the 54 states of the Africa Group. South African delegation recommends that in preparation for INC-2, the Secretariat prepares a paper that provides detailed policy options for control measures that are within the scope of the instrument, delineated across the full life cycle of plastics. Given the vast and diverse submissions and discussions held this week, the synthesis paper would assist the INC to swiftly move into engaging with the text of the instrument. South Africa recommends intersessional work on control measures upstream, midstream, and downstream of the life cycle of plastics. South Africa recommends that planning of 2 contact groups for INC-2 be put in place. The first one looking into control measures across the full life cycle of plastics, and the second one looking into the means of implementation. Due consideration should be given to financial support for the attendance of developing countries, and this should be given to 2 representatives. Chairperson, we have heard this week that discussions could only be limited to 1 session at a time due to limitations on the size of delegations. Thank you, Chairperson.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Guinea-Bissau.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Congratulations on your nomination. To the government of Uruguay, we thank you for your hospitality. Guinea-Bissau shares the same ideas as the African group to which it belongs and hopes that during the negotiation process, the specificities and needs of each country will be considered. Although we not produce plastic, it is part of our daily lives. However, in 2013, the law that prohibits the use, manufacture, import, sale, and distribution of plastic bags came into force. We found that the law is not sufficient, as there was indeed a reduction, but it was temporary. Therefore, greater information and awareness of the population is necessary, insofar as the more enlightened it is, we reduce the excessive use of plastics. The Institute of Biodiversity and Protected Areas, under the auspice of the Ministry of Environment and Biodiversity, has done a great job managing 2 marine protected areas, the João Vieira Poilão National Park and the Orango National Park. One of the problems it faces plastic pollution from the mainland. Mr. President, we call on you to help us develop a legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment and sustainable development projects. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Guinea-Bissau. I give now the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity once again for the Philippines to share its views on the recommendation for further work as being envisioned to be captured in the intersectional work. So the Philippines would like first to focus on the first group of control measures, which is related to the elimination and reduction criteria framework for determining materials and applications that should be subjected to this control measure group, as referred to in agenda item 4. Further, we would like that this further work would focus also on how to explore possible standards for product design, circularity and recycling. For example, a thorough review of available international standards, like, for example, the ISO, gaps and needs for further development. Further, intersectional work should also establish contact groups that will organize informal discussions and preparations of recommended measures to be presented at INC-2 for consideration. And of course, most important of all is the preparation of the draft zero based on discussion in this INC-1. Further, there should be the inclusion of options for control measures for elimination and reduction, as I've mentioned, and as also mentioned by other parties, member states, as well as the redesigning for circularity in practice, and also environmental sound, waste management, and remediation. Mr. Chair, the contact group should also focus on core obligations and control measures, as well as the means of implementation. May these measures be deal with upstream, midstream, and downstream control measures. As I've also mentioned by other member states, contact groups should also should be created and should take note on what are those cross-cutting measures, and also how this would relate to other work streams. There's also the importance of establishment of scientific body and also the support for additional participation of member states. Mr. Chair, we aligned with Thailand on the importance of in-depth and detailed information that Secretariat can provide to advance the work of the INC. We also align with Switzerland and Canada on the proposal of 2 contact groups. So this can focus on core obligation and control measures across the full life cycle of plastics, upstream, midstream, and downstream, and also the means of implementation and institutional arrangements. We also support a transparent and inclusive process. And lastly, Mr. Chair, finally, we support intersectional work on the preparation of detailed options for control measures across full life cycle and for informal meetings and discussions that can be virtual. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Philippines. I will now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka, followed by the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Chair. In considering the INC-2 as the timeline is ambitious, the proposed groups and by parallel sessions, it's brought to the notice that at least 2 participants are facilitated from countries to participate in the INC to make more productive interventions. And also it is recommended to have a high-level segment as proposed by other countries also earlier to ensure political leadership and support in future implementation activities where we get them board at the initial stage. And in considering the upstream, midstream, and downstream waste management, considering the priority and requirements of the countries, I think some of the developing countries will have to have more emphasis on downstream waste management practices and have more emphasis on those at the very initial stage. So we will be concentrating more on the downstream activities. And we need some more technical assistance in the fields of certain areas, because in initiatives and activities, the inventory preparation, the imports and exports of plastics, and the material balance, how it goes inside the country, how it is moved, is very important in evaluation and monitoring processes later. Therefore, we have to prepare the inventories first. So for that, the technical guidance is also required. And we humbly request that some technical guidance is provided for the countries to initiate activities on this. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka. I give now the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation, followed by Burkina Faso.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Российская делегация приветствует предложение председателя по подготовке первоначального проекта документа и соответствующее решение первой сессии Межправительственного комитета. Мы рассматриваем это как серьезное продвижение вперед и важный результат нашей сессии. Заблаговременная подготовка секретариатом такого документа позволит делегациям сконцентрироваться на конкретной работе по тексту природоохранного соглашения. Также высоко оцениваем предложение о разделении переговорного процесса на 2 параллельных трека. Это позволит существенно ускорить процесс согласования. Благодарю за внимание, господин председатель.
We thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Burkina Faso, followed by the Republic of Korea.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma délégation soutient la déclaration faite par le groupe africain. Le traité en cours d'élaboration devrait prévoir un système solide de suivi-évaluation. En effet, les pays comme le nôtre ne fabriquent pas de plastique, mais nous en importons. Il sera donc impérieux de s'assurer que les plastiques que nous importons ne contiennent pas de produits chimiques dangereux afin de ne pas perturber l'économie circulaire qui doit se mettre en place autour du plastique. Ce système de suivi et évaluation permettra de suivre la quantité de plastique, la nature des éléments constitutifs, le volume des déchets plastiques générés, la capacité d'absorption de ces déchets dans le recyclage et aussi nous insistons sur la mesure de la qualité de l'air en rapport avec le brûlage, l'incinération et l'enfouissement des déchets plastiques. La question du recyclage devrait figurer en bonne place. Quels déchets plastiques recyclés actuellement avant 2024, date d'adoption du nouvel instrument? En effet, il y a beaucoup d'évidences scientifiques sur la nocivité des déchets plastiques sur la santé quand ils sont recyclés. Nous appelons à des actions d'information et de sensibilisation au bénéfice des collecteurs et des recycleurs des déchets sur les dangers liés à la collecte et au recyclage des déchets plastiques, et aussi sur les alternatives pour préserver leur santé et l'environnement. Définitivement, il faut une économie circulaire du plastique avec des emplois verts et décents. Monsieur le Président, comme souligné à l'entame, le Burkina Faso est en train d'élaborer son plan d'action national de lutte contre la pollution plastique. L'INC-1 a été très instructif et permettra d'améliorer le contenu de ces plans d'action en tenant compte de tout le cycle de vie du plastique et de tous les acteurs, gouvernement, société civile, chercheurs, industrie, population. Toute assistance pour accompagner mon pays dans l'élaboration et la mise en œuvre de ces plans d'action est la bienvenue. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je remercie le distinguished représentant de la Burkina Faso. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Republic of Korea, followed by Rwanda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On sequencing and the recommended future work of the next meetings, the Republic of Korea is of the view that we need to go ahead for substantive negotiations from the start of the INC-2, as we have heavy workload ahead of us until 2024. So we support the idea of having 2 parallel groups, whether they are informal or working groups, following the work streams that we have discussed during this session for the efficiency of the discussion. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Rwanda.
Thank you, Chair. Rwanda believes that engagement with the stakeholders and we need their expertise to enrich discussion and understanding to elaborate an ambitious treaty. We have taken good note that INC will not organize another multi-stakeholders forum, but rather seeks ways to improve stakeholders' engagement, in particular during the intersession period. We have heard many stakeholders and delegations that it is a key to get more targets, written inputs in due time before the INC-1 meetings to absorb this information. We furthermore think it is useful to set 2 working streams for INC-2 to progress our discussion. Group 1 could be focused on objective, co-obligation, control measures, implementation measures. Then Group 2 could focus on means of implementation, including financial assistance and capacity building, as well as institutional arrangement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Rwanda. I now give the floor to a distinguished representative of Egypt, followed by Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Egypt aligns with the statement delivered by Senegal on behalf of the African Group. Wish to add a few points in our national capacity. Mr. Chair, we agree with the sentiment expressed by many today that the approach we take should certainly not undermine the inclusivity of this process, and in particular for smaller delegations. And in this regard, we should not have more than 2 contact groups operating simultaneously. I also agree with previous speakers that provisions should be made, in this case, for the participation of at least 2 delegates per developing country. Mr. Chair, as my delegation has expressed on previous occasions, action and support should progress at the same speed in our discussions, because we certainly view them as 2 sides of the same coin. Mr. Chair, at our next meeting, we must have a strategic discussion on scope, objectives, approach, and structure, as well as, of course, key definitions, before we can have meaningful discussions on potential measures, potential national reporting, etc. With, of course, discussions happening on means of implementation at the same pace. All these elements are interlinked and must progress as parts of a cohesive whole. Arrangements for a scientific body, including for socio-economic research, as was helpfully proposed by many speakers this week, will also be key for enabling our work across the board. As I close, Mr. Chair, there is no doubt that we have a Herculean task before us, but our shared desire for ambition and expediency should not undermine inclusivity or indeed our ability to design a meaningful and effective regime which can deliver tangible results. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Egypt. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pakistan echoes Switzerland, Canada, and Philippines. Pakistan supports the proposal of 2 streams, one on objectives, scope, core obligations, and control measures, and second on means of implementation and financing, institutional arrangements, assessment of progress of implementation, and stakeholder engagements. We also support for establishing contact group, subject to ensure funding for 2 participants, as already many member states pointed out. We support intersessional work between INC-1 to INC-2 to discuss substantial work. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan. We heard all the intervention of state delegates, and now we will pass to observers, intervention from observers. We have one request from Trash, the representative of Trash for Peace. So it's on microphone 59.
My name is Barbara Weber, and I'm here on the behalf of the International Alliance of Waste Pickers. Ground Score Association, and waste pickers like myself who work in the United States. Thank you to the president of this INC and to Uruguay, South Africa, Kenya, Chile, Colombia, Brazil, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Norway, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and Ecuador, Sri Lanka, and the other countries that have stood in recognition of waste pickers in this treaty process, as well as the importance of a just transition for those who collect plastic. We are workers and need to be recognized as such. We welcome assurances from member states that we will continue to be able to participate in this treaty process and provide inputs based on our experiences and local knowledge. To that end, we'd like to repeat our call for financial and logistical support for our observers, including interpretation. We recommend the adoption of the UN Habitat's report, Leaving No One Behind, how a global instrument to end plastic pollution can enable a just transition for people informally collecting and recovering waste. As an official document to inform the treaty and suggest that member states read it. We also ask for a study on the impact of plastics on the health of waste pickers. We reject the false solutions like incineration and pyrolysis and demand that petrochemical companies immediately phase out toxic chemicals right there. Okay. Okay. Out of plastic production and recycling, and eliminate non-recyclable plastics and ensure that all material has value. Above all, we demand a just transition, not only for those who collect and process plastic, but also for those of us who live and work amidst the pollution of plastic production and management. This requires direct funding for our communities, appropriate technology transfer, and a decent and safe work in reuse, repair, and mechanical recycling. The opportunities that come out of this treaty process need to be reserved first and foremost for those of us who are currently risk our lives to mitigate plastic pollution through recycling and those who have suffered the consequences of plastic production and management. Recycling without waste pickers is garbage. We must be a binding treaty committed to the ongoing and meaningful inclusion of impacted stakeholders such as ourselves. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Trash for Peace. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bahrain, followed by Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know that we have a very ambitious timeline for developing a new legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. We agree with other members that in INC-2 we should discuss the potential options for the elements of the instrument. We also support the establishment of contact groups to facilitate the discussions. However, due to a limited number of delegations of some member states, there should be no more than 2 contact group discussions in parallel. Mr. Chair, on INC-2, we believe that 2 contact groups should be established. The first contact group will discuss the core obligations and control measures on promoting environmentally sound management of plastic waste. The second group, contact group will discuss the means of implementations and financial mechanism. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bahrain. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil, followed by the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. With regards to sequencing and recommended further work to be undertaken by the INC, Brazil believes that the committee needs to ensure that the debate on obligations and implementation measures and the discussion on means of implementation inform one another. We mean that as we come up with proposals for obligations and measures of implementation, we concurrently design the respective and proportional means of implementation. The future instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, shall be ambitious, but it must also be effective. And to be so, it will require equally ambitious means of implementation for developing nations. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brazil. I'll now give the floor to a distinguished representative of the United Kingdom, followed by Uganda.
Thank you, Chair. The UK would like to echo its support for the views expressed by many other delegations on the need for INC funding to be prioritised to enable attendance from 2 delegates for each developing country at INC2 and beyond. To that end, we also believe we should set up 2 contact groups focused on the following. The first one on objectives, core obligations, control measures, and voluntary approaches. The second one on capacity building, technical assistance, and finance, as well as institutional arrangements. We recognise how powerful it could be to have high-level segments that function as a platform for major commitments towards objectives of the treaty. However, we think it is important to time the high-level segments at a later point in negotiations as a way of giving momentum to completion of negotiations. Stakeholders across the life cycle of plastics should be able to participate in and inform our negotiations through written submissions and virtual dialogues at this early stage. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. I now give the floor to a distinguished representative of Uganda, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Ugandan delegation aligns itself to the statement delivered by Senegal on behalf of the African Group and the views of the other delegates expressed in this room. In order to make progress in the negotiations, our delegation suggests that the work can be organized along 2 tracks, that is, the substantive matters such as the scope, core objectives, core measures, and other such measures, and another on means of implementation and general provisions. However, in order not to strain particularly small delegations, we suggest that there should not be more than 2 contact groups running at a time. To ensure inclusiveness during the negotiations, we emphasize that there needs to be support for participation of at least 2 delegates per member state, particularly from developing countries. We believe that progress can be further enriched by intersessional work, including, where possible, regional consultative meetings. Considering the time and resource constraints, we emphasize that the stakeholder consultations should not encroach on valuable time for the negotiations. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Uganda. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nigeria, followed by an online intervention from India.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nigeria aligns herself with the statement of the African Group presented by the Senegal delegation. However, my delegation has outlined a group of items for consideration. On plastic life cycle, in line with the UNIA Resolution 5/4, an appropriate delineation of plastic be done to address the stages of plastic life cycle. Stakeholders' discussion be engaged on transparency, including knowledge and ingredients in plastic materials and its sustainable product design through global standards. The need to prioritize the issue of means of implementation at the INC-2 is very, very pertinent. We also stress the need for active participation, involvement, and engagement in line with UNIA Resolution 1/5 on integrated and sustainable financial consideration. Mr. Chair, the partnership initiative should be sustainable to adequately address the needs of developing countries. Finally, Mr. Chair, my delegation strongly suggests that the INC Secretariat consider extending funding to at least 2 delegations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nigeria. I will now give the floor online to the distinguished representative of India. India, you have the floor.
Am I audible?
We hear you.
Yeah. Thank you. And a very good morning, good afternoon to all of the participants. And as I've taken the floor from the side of Indian delegation for the first time, I would try to and like to extend my sincere thanks to the government of Uruguay for hosting the first meeting of Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee and the INC Secretariat for organizing the meeting and for preparing the documents for consideration of the Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee. It was indeed an insightful and engaging experience for the entire interdelegation, listening to the inputs, comments, and very valuable insights of all the distinguished delegates over the last 5 days. I would like to bring in certain aspects over and above what different delegates, distinguished delegates, have put forth on the table in regard to the intersectional work and how we should be taking up the work in the INC too. One very important thing as has come today is that we need to work in two contact groups. One would be working on the objectives, then core obligations, control measures, and voluntary approaches. And the other would be on the implementational aspects of this international legally binding instrument that would be coming up. I'd like to submit and share that because however good the international legally binding instrument be there on the table, very much lies on the design and proportional means of implementation there to be with all the parties, particularly the developing countries. And in that regard, what I want to submit and share is during the intersessional period, when the Secretariat takes up the work, it is very important that we look into the availability of the technologies in regard to any of the potential control measures or potential core obligations or even the voluntary approaches that we would be thinking about. So we should be bringing in the technological aspects in the intersessional work, the way different countries are placed in adopting, in having the access to those technologies, the availability and affordability of the technologies, what could be the potential technology transfer that could be envisaged. In order that when we sit in INC2 and discuss about the options regarding these obligations, core obligations, and control measures and voluntary approaches, we would be well informed about the cost aspects of all the technologies and what would be required on the part of the developing countries to get into those potential areas that would come up and become part of international legally binding instrument. And second thing, I would like to add on to it that during the intersessional period, when the Secretariat would be working on various options in regard to very many things, we need to incorporate all the experiences that have gone in through adoption of several of the policies and legislations across different countries, in order that whatever is presented and deliberated in INC2 would be a very practical elements based on the experiences of different countries across the globe who may have initiated it and who may have implemented it, maybe implementing those. Thank you, Mr. Kochi. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of India, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Jordan.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. بداية أننا نعتقد أنه فيما يتعلق بالعمل أثناء الدورة الثانية فأن المقترح المقدم من الرئاسة هو اقتراح جيد نستطيع المضي قدما فيه والمتضمن إنشاء مجموعتي عمل. المجموعة الأولى تعنى بالأهداف والمحتوى والإجراءات سواء إجراءات الحد أو التخفيف، والمجموعة الثانية تعنى بالتنفيذ وبناء القدرات والآليات المالية والبناء المؤسسي. السيد الرئيس، على ضوء الضغط الذي نواجهه في الإطار الزمني، حيث من المفترض أن ننهي أعمالنا المتعلق بوضع صك دولي ملزم بحلول نهاية عام 2024، فإننا نرى أن يبدأ العمل بعد انتهاء هذه الدورة فوراً، أو بما يسمى العمل بين الدورات، ضمن جدول زمني تعده الأمانة، ويتضمن تاريخ لتقديم المقترحات من قبل الدول، ويتبعه أن تقوم الأمانة بإعداد وثيقة شاملة compilation document بناء على مخرجات الدورة الأولى INC-1 وما قدمته الدول، وأن يبدأ العمل فيما بين الدورات عن طريق الأمانة أو عن طريق دول leading countries تتبنى بعض النهوج وتدعو الأطراف أو المجموعات الفاعلة من خلال مجموعات العمل التي تم الإشارة إليها، وأن يكون أيضا هناك مشاركة فاعلة من قبل المجموعات الإقليمية regional groups التي نتوقع أن تجتمع عن بعد أو اجتماعات فيزيائية مباشرة فيما بين الدورات وقبل انعقاد الدورة الثانية، آملين أن يتم تحقيق مزيد من التقدم قبل انعقاد الدورة الثانية. شكرا السيد الرئيس.
I thank the distinguished representative of Jordan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kenya, followed by Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Kenyan delegation aligns to the statement by the African group. Mr. Chair, my delegation recalls that the journey for this process of on plastic pollution started in Nairobi, and it is indeed a source of joy looking back to where we have come and the far that we have, the journey we have made so far. Distinguished delegates, the past few days of deliberations have indeed been quite enriching in terms of new information that we have been exposed to, and indeed aiding in the collective conceptualization of what each one of the member states present here envisions as an instrument that we are so eager to craft. On intersessional work, Kenya would like to urge the Secretariat to ensure that there is sustained engagement in the build-up towards INC-2 in the form of dialogues, both in person and online, also webinars, and if possible, publications. Further, Kenya fully supports the organization of the multi-stakeholder forums and dialogue that will foster the element of inclusivity in the process. Mr. Chair, Kenya would also like to take this opportune moment to inform the plenary of the Just Transition Initiative, which is a joint initiative with the delegation of South Africa and the Global Alliance of Waste Pickers and other stakeholders that seek to foster the element of a just transition within the letter and spirit of the proposed legally binding instrument. Distinguished delegates, the Kenya delegation would like to invite interested member states who wish to secure an all-inclusive legally binding instrument that ensures the spirit of leaving no one behind to approach the Kenyan or South African delegations for further engagement moving forward. I thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kenya. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia, followed by Zambia.
Thank you, Chair. I will speak on behalf of the group of Latin America and the Caribbean. GRULAC proposes that INC-2 be a mixture of plenary and two proposed work streams. Stream 1 could be on core obligations, control measures, and voluntary approaches, implementation measures, and means of implementation. Stream 2 could be on introductory elements, institutional arrangements, and other matters. The work streams should be conducted in such a way that means of implementation be addressed concurrently with obligations and measures. We call on the Chair, together with the Secretariat, to continue to work on detailed information on the specific subjects and the modalities of work for each of these streams, based on the submissions made in the intersessional period and the document of potential options for elements toward an international instrument, and that this be included in a scenario note for INC-2. Thank you very much, Chair.
Agradezco al distinguido representante de Colombia por su intervención en representación del GRULAC. I will now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Zambia, followed by Australia.
Thank you, Chair. As we are taking the floor for the first time, Zambia would like to congratulate you on your appointment to chair to this committee. I wish to thank the government of Uruguay for hosting us and to the Secretariat for taking time to arrange this important meeting and the preparation of the documents we have been considering in our discussions. Zambia aligns itself with the statement of the African Group. Zambia recognizes the importance of negotiating a legally binding instrument on plastic that will aim to eliminate plastic pollution and the impacts to human health and the environment, including in the marine environment. My country hopes to see the text that will address the life cycle of plastics in line with the upstream, midstream, and downstream. It is our hope that all forms of plastic will be addressed, including plastics in the construction, agricultural, healthcare, fishing, textile, and food industries. With regards to the sequencing, we propose that the intersessional work should include the upstream, midstream, and downstream to be considered before INC-2, to comprehensively address each stage of the life cycle in line with UNEA Resolution 514. On this, a reasonable delineation of the life cycle of plastics may include sourcing of raw materials, virgin polymer production and consumption, product design and use, waste management and treatment, and plastic in the environment. Regarding national reporting, stakeholders including producers of plastic, waste pickers, and recyclers will be critical in provision of data that will be part of the national reports. The information should be based on transparency, including full knowledge of the ingredients in plastic materials and sustainable product design through global sustainability criteria and standards, and eliminating harmful chemicals in plastics. This is to ensure transparency across the value chain. The Zambian delegation, in attendance both in person and online, remains committed to seeing the work of this intergovernmental negotiating committee progress to the drafting and conclusion of the international legally binding instrument on plastic. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Zambia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia, followed by Malawi and Ecuador.
Thank you, Chair. Australia is mindful of the considerable task ahead of members and is eager to commence discussions on substantive items for a legally binding instrument at INC-2. Australia supports intersessional activities ahead of INC-2, including stakeholder consultation and the preparation of clear options paper by the Secretariat to assist members' timely preparation for INC-2. Australia supports comments by other members, and we see merit in the establishment of 2 contact groups. We echo calls from the United Kingdom, Canada, and others that the first contact group should discuss objectives, core obligations, control measures, and voluntary approaches. The second contact group should address capacity building, institutional arrangements, means of implementation, and other elements. Australia looks forward to working with all members to develop an ambitious instrument that will end plastic pollution. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia. I give now the floor to the distinguished representative of Malawi.
Thank you, Chair. Malawi aligns itself with the statement delivered by the African Group, and we deliver the statement in our national capacity. We concur with the various speakers before us who have outlined the need for the development of various contact groups as well as specific tracks discussing thematic areas or potential elements of the treaty, while bearing in mind challenges of small delegations who may not be able to participate effectively in the INC if more than 2 tracks are conducted in parallel. Malawi remains flexible in consideration of the organization of work moving forward, but however, we want to highlight that it is important to finalize discussions relating to scope, objectives, because these will shape the discussions on various elements of the treaty in the subsequent INCs. With that said, we would like to highlight 2 core themes that we feel should be discussed in the next subsequent INCs. We would like to highlight control measures as well as implementing measures. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malawi. Ahora le doy la palabra al distinguido representante del Ecuador.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Hacemos eco de la declaración de Colombia, a quien agradecemos por su gran trabajo como coordinador de nuestro grupo regional de América Latina y el Caribe. Quisiéramos además agregar que nuestras deliberaciones se verán enriquecidas en INC-2 si durante el periodo interseccional recibimos contribuciones escritas por parte de múltiples actores, si mantenemos sesiones virtuales de puntos focales, así como reuniones regionales, y si aseguramos consultas o diálogos virtuales con múltiples actores, y en este tema es importante que sean estas discusiones inclusivas, enfocadas en temas específicos, para que puedan informar en forma efectiva nuestras negociaciones. Gracias, presidente.
Le agradezco a la distinguida representante del Ecuador y ahora le doy la palabra al distinguido representante de la Argentina, seguido por la República Dominicana.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Agradecemos de la misma manera la propuesta que nos ha presentado. Mi delegación se asocia con la intervención que ha pronunciado el distinguido delegado de Colombia en nombre de nuestro grupo regional. Señor presidente, una vez más reiteramos que para nosotros es fundamental que la discusión sobre medios de implementación tenga lugar a la misma velocidad que otras discusiones y otros debates que tenemos son los que tenemos que tener acuerdo para acordar el texto de un futuro tratado. Por lo tanto, la propuesta del grupo regional nos parece que va en línea con esa orientación. Consideramos que 2 grupos de contacto son suficientes para trabajar en la próxima segunda sesión del comité. Y también por esa misma razón reiteramos nuestra solicitud de que se pueda financiar un segundo delegado por cada Estado en desarrollo para participar en la misma. Del mismo modo, señor presidente, con relación al trabajo interseccional, en caso de constituirse grupos de trabajo, también solicitamos que no sean más de 2, de modo que delegaciones pequeñas podamos cubrirlas de la manera en que estos merecen ser atendidos. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Agradezco al distinguido representante de la Argentina y ahora le doy la palabra al distinguido representante de la República Dominicana.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Agradecemos el trabajo que ha sido realizado en estos días tanto por la Secretaría como por la Presidencia y por los cofacilitadores del Grupo Informal de Trabajo. Sabemos que han sido largas jornadas de productivas consultas con los distintos sectores y partes, lo que ciertamente ha ayudado a ampliar y complementar la visión de todos los presentes sobre el futuro de estas negociaciones. Nos queda claro que este será un proceso que seguirá requiriendo del involucramiento de todas las partes interesadas y esperamos que este sea un proceso complementario al programa de trabajo de la INC, que permite una mayor integración de estas partes. En esta misma línea, este proceso no debe ir en detrimento de la participación de al menos 2 representantes de las delegaciones de los pequeños estados insulares de desarrollo y países en desarrollo.
La tarea que tenemos por delante es una de dimensiones titánicas. Las futuras INC deben caracterizarse por el avance oportuno de las negociaciones de los elementos de este acuerdo. Apoyamos lo expresado por el GRULAC de que para los fines se deben establecer 2 grupos informales o grupos de contacto que traten temáticas y modalidades de trabajo específicas, las cuales pueden ser definidas a partir de los resultados de lo presentado en los periodos intersesionales. Por igual, señor presidente, entendemos que hablar en este momento de reuniones de alto nivel es hablar de restar tiempo dedicado a las necesarias negociaciones que deben avanzar si queremos lograr un acuerdo para la fecha propuesta. Muchas gracias.
Agradezco a la distinguida representante de la República Dominicana. We'll return to interventions from observers. I will give the floor to the representative of Action on Smoking and Health, microphone 15.
Go ahead, please.
We will now give to the floor to the representative of PASINDE. PASINDE, microphone 67.
Muchas gracias, Presidente. We would like to express our gratitude to the host country of the Oriental Republic of Uruguay for hosting the INC-1. Regarding sequencing and further work, we would like to express the following views. First, we request that the Secretariat organizes more online capacity building sessions for youth and further interested groups. Second, we request that the next steps be structured in a manner that allows for stakeholder inputs to be meaningfully reflected in the INC discussions. If a multi-stakeholder forum is organized intersessionally, we request that background and working documents be made available before the forum so the stakeholders can provide inputs. Third, as the youth constituency, we once again highlight the urgency of the problem we are facing. Children today are being born with plastics in their bloodstream, and we do not have time. The pace of our solutions must respond to the problem that we are facing. Finally, we also would like to bring to attention that the plastic issue is multifold. In short, it's about 7 sectors: fishing gears, agricultural plastics, packaging, transportation, textiles, healthcare, and construction. As we go forward, we'll need to create sector-specific strategies, and this must be taken into account as future work is prepared. Muchas gracias, Presidente.
I thank the representative of PASINDE. I give now the floor to the representative of Integrative Strategies Forum, microphone 27.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. During this week, we have spent time discussing the detrimental impacts of plastics in both human health and the environment. But we have spent even more time discussing things of no relevance to tackle the true scale of plastic pollution. Just today, the UN General Secretary acknowledged that plastics are fossil fuels in another form and pose a serious threat to human rights, to climate, and biodiversity. What we still haven't mentioned is the devastating loss of ancestral, traditional, and cultural heritage and knowledge caused by plastics as an extension of colonialism. The plastic industry has systemically replaced traditional zero-waste, reuse, and refill systems that existed at the core of our values and cultures by creating and forcing upon us a dependence on plastics. The plastic crisis is not only directly connected to the climate crisis and to biodiversity loss, it is also connected to social inequities, systemic racism, systemic erasure, and waste colonialism. In that sense, Mr. President, plastics are so much more than a danger to our health and the health of the environment. They are a danger to our cultural diversity and to our ancestral traditional systems. systems that during millennia operated in alignment and balance with the environment. That's why in terms of sequencing, we feel it is important to acknowledge the contribution of our communities at each stage of the negotiations. I believe there is a serious conflict of interest having the industry being part of the negotiations, so I invite the communities most affected by this crisis, including those within the United States, to continue to hold industry accountable and not to let them distract you with false solutions that would only perpetuate cultural erasure and environmental injustices. There's no place for toxic plastics or bioplastics in a truly circular economy. In order to achieve systemic transformation through a truly circular economy, we must reclaim, protect, and promote traditional and ancestral systems. The knowledge of our communities will be crucial in the mitigation of the triple crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and plastic pollution. Gracias, señor presidente.
Agradezco a la representante de Integrative Strategy Forum y le doy la palabra al distinguido representante de Chile.
Gracias, señor presidente. En primer lugar, nos queremos alinear con lo expresado por el distinguido delegado de Colombia y agradecer igualmente, que lo han hecho otras delegaciones, su trabajo como coordinador del GRULAC en esta sesión. Tal como ha sido expresado por otras delegaciones, creemos que es necesario tener dos grupos informales que traten modalidades específicas. Asimismo, entendemos que el tener reuniones regionales preparatorias es altamente deseable a fin de avanzar en las posiciones comunes de los grupos regionales. Igualmente, nos alineamos con la intervención de las delegaciones que han señalado que este proceso no debe afectar la participación de los delegados de los países, por lo cual le solicitamos a la Secretaría que a partir de esta INC se financie permanentemente a dos delegados nacionales para tener tanto una visión técnica como una visión política del proceso. Finalmente, respecto a la idea de contar con un segmento de alto nivel, aun cuando creemos que son instancias valiosas, consideramos que es muy prematuro en este momento del proceso y ciertamente podría potencialmente evaluarse dicha solicitud cuando estemos cerca de la conferencia de plenipotenciarios, momento en que quizás se requiera una guía política a las discusiones más técnicas. Gracias, señor presidente.
Agradezco al distinguido representante de Chile y ahora le ofrezco la palabra en el micrófono 77. ¿Podría presentarse, por favor?
Do I just press this then? Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates. I serve as co-chair of IPEN. IPEN has been an active stakeholder representing public interest organizations, bringing voices from the network of more than 600 organizations in over 120 countries, mainly from the Global South, to the negotiations, starting with the Stockholm Convention. Our members from around the world are directly harmed throughout the entire life cycle of plastics, from the production of fossil fuels, plastics and chemicals manufacturing, use and disposal. We uphold and support a health and human rights-based approach in the development of the new treaty. We have set an ambitious goal to finish the negotiations within 2 years, while many global processes are ongoing at the same time. Therefore, the Multi-Stakeholders Forum during the INCs is both a distraction and a waste of human and financial resources toward completing the negotiations on time. We believe that the best way to have the broadest participation is to have an open, transparent, and inclusive process both during the INCs and in the intersessional period. We stand in support and solidarity with the waste pickers and for their rights to a safe and healthy environment. IPEN will continue to engage at the national and regional levels as well as an INC observer to ensure that the toxic impacts and harmful health effects of plastics are addressed in the final text of the treaty. A multi-stakeholders forum during the INCs will not be necessary. Thank you for your consideration of our perspectives.
I thank the representative of IPEN. We have one more observer in microphone 7. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am taking the floor on behalf of Environment and Social Development Organization, a public interest organization from Bangladesh and South Asia. Mr. Chair, we firmly believe that the participation of all stakeholders in the INC process is very important for the inclusive global plastic treaty to develop an internationally legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including the marine environment. Mr. Chair, we do not believe a multi-stakeholder forum is the best way for stakeholder engagement, but instead urge the member state to allow and open all regional meetings to all stakeholders and to create a space for meaningful discussion between them. This will include the importance of the participation of all stakeholders, including CSOs, NGOs, academias. This also requires in-person participation and ensuring financial support to delegates, observers from low and mid-income countries in the INC process. We believe we will achieve together our goal within this short time period. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank for your intervention. I think we have two more interventions from observers. Observer in microphone 43.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for giving me the floor. Our organization, Eco-Project Partnership, has been working for many years on the international chemicals and waste agenda. We consider that a multi-stakeholder nature of the negotiations process has a key importance for the success of the process. However, when it comes to the option of having a multi-stakeholders forum during or back-to-back with the next INC, we would rather not support this idea, as from our perspective, it takes energy and capacity away of the actual negotiations. Instead of organizing another multi-stakeholder forum, we would suggest to support other ways of exchanging stakeholder views, such as regional and national preparation meetings open for all stakeholders. Also, we think that in order to increase the level of multi-stakeholder involvement into the process, it would be valuable to open regional meetings to all stakeholders from the region, so to create a space for discussions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your intervention. Our last observer will be in microphone 69. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to the Secretariat for bringing all the stakeholders and member states in this important forum. I am Rodolfo Beltran from EarthDay.org. Since 1970, our organization in New York launched the first Earth Day. Now we are present. Earth Day belongs to everybody and is present in 192 countries of the world. These are our reflections for this important forum. Immediate end to single plastics by 2030. Polluter pay principle. This is very important, which provides that those who produce pollution pay for it, as well as producers and retailers. Investment in innovation to replace all fossil fuels based on plastics. Tobacco and education go together. This must be clearly understood in all the cleanups that we make all over the years. Let's remember that the last assembly, United Nations General Assembly 67, declared that access to a healthy environment is a human right. And I congratulate these two, Antonio Gutierrez, the General Secretary, for that. Ban the movement of plastics for high-income countries to lower-income countries, based in the Convention of Basel. This is very important. China took this decision to ban in 2018. Let's follow up and be more strict, the same way that we are strict in visas and passports. Let's be strict in these movements, hazardous materials and disposal. Add enforcement provision, of course. In the interim, remove an ultimate ban all chemicals known as hazardous to humanity, ban burden plastics. And to end, Mr. Chairman, I want to congratulate all the stakeholders that came. Somebody has an average of 40 hours for the countries. Congratulate to the Secretary because they have the voice of the stakeholders. And also Uruguay. This is one of the most important events in the last years in the environment, and multilateral environment and stockholder. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you to the representative of Earth Day Network. Now we have one more. The last one is observer in association, Abel Granier, is in microphone 52. Association, yes. Abel Granier.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. يعتبر بلاد تونس رغم مساحتها الصغيرة المستهلك الرابع فيما يخص استعمال الزجاجات البلاستيكية في منطقة البحر الأبيض المتوسط، ونطمح من خلال هذا الصك إلى وضع حد من الاستعمال الغير مبرر للكميات الكبيرة من البلاستيك التي تحمل مواد كيميائية وإضافات سامة تلوث أوساطنا وتضر بصحتنا. وفي هذا الإطار فنحن لا نقلل من أهمية حوار أصحاب المصلحة المتعدد الذي تم اعتماده ودعمه خلال هذا المؤتمر، ولكن نظراً لضيق الوقت الذي يداهمنا وكل العالم الذي وضعنا تحت المجهر والذي يتابع مخرجات هذا اللقاء واللقاءات القادمة لوضع صك يستجيب لطموحات مليارات من المواطنين للحد من مخاطر التلوث البلاستيكي، ونوصي بشدة بعدم تخصيص المساحات المخصصة لنقاش الصك وبنوده على أصحاب المصلحة multi stakeholder forum في اللقاءات القادمة، ولكن التركيز على إحداث قاعدة لتبادل المعلومات مثل المشاورات والاجتماعات العامة الوطنية والاجتماعات التحضيرية الإقليمية لمناقشة البنود الاجتماعات المقبلة. ثانياً، عوض على تدعيم النقاش لأصحاب المصلحة نطلب منكم فتح جميع الاجتماعات الإقليمية لهم، وهي الفرصة الأنفع لإجراء مناقشات هادفة بين جميع أصحاب المصلحة. ثالثاً، تم دعم 9 مشاركين من أصحاب المصلحة، وهو يعتبر عدداً لا يمثل مشاركة كل شرائح المجتمع المتأثرة بالتلوث البلاستيكي من أصوات النساء والشباب والحكومات المحلية والمزارعين والمجتمعات الأصلية من مختلف مناطق العالم، ونتمنى أن يؤخذ بعين الاعتبار لدعم واسع للمشاركة لكل أصحاب الأطراف. وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Association, Abel Granier. This was our last intervention for this sub-item 5 on sequencing and recommend further work. It's clear we have a limited time to complete our mandate. I've heard a clear message that no one should be left behind. Several interventions proposing that this process should be open, inclusive, transparent, and ordered. There is a need to ensure time and financial resources are maximized. I've heard we should pay attention to intersectional work with possible contact groups on substantive matters. In this regard, INC-2 will be a mixture of plenary and 2 proposed work streams, the format of which will be further defined. Options could include contact groups, working groups, or any other format. It is the intention of the Chair to establish 2 such streams of work based on potential elements. I will appoint 4 member states, taking into account regional and gender balance, to co-facilitate each of these streams and will inform accordingly. More detailed information on the modalities of work for each of these streams will be further developed and shared by the Chair in due course. I also note that many contact groups would not be held in parallel. I take due note of this request from several delegations not to have more than 2 contact groups working at the same time, to maximize participation of small delegations. I also heard a call for documentation to be prepared by the Secretariat, and in this regard, I would like to now move on to the report back from the informal group on their discussions yesterday. So may I invite now the co-facilitators of the group to report on its work. So I'll give now the floor to the representative of Canada, and after Ecuador. Canada has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The informal group met twice yesterday, first at lunchtime and then in the evening. The co-facilitators provided 2 draft texts for the informal group to consider. The drafts had been posted on the meeting webpage. The first text relates to a document that the Secretariat be mandated to provide for the INC at its second meeting. After some discussion, the group agreed to forward an amended proposal to the plenary for its consideration. I will now read that proposal at dictation speed. The Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee requested the Secretariat to prepare for consideration by the committee at its second session a document with potential options for elements towards an international legally binding instrument based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastics as called for by UNEA Resolution 5/14, including identifying the objective, substantive provisions, including core obligations, control measures, and voluntary approaches, implementation measures, and means of implementation. This document could include both legally binding and voluntary measures. The document to be prepared by the Secretariat is intended to facilitate the committee's work without in any way prejudging what the committee might decide regarding the structure and provisions of the instrument. The Secretariat, in preparing the document, will, in consultations with the Chair, draw on the views expressed by members during the first session of the committee and as well as their written submissions. The committee invited stakeholders to communicate to the Secretariat their written submissions by XX 2023 and further invited members to communicate to the Secretariat their written submissions by XX 2023. The committee requested the Secretariat to post any submissions received on the INC website. I will now turn to my co-facilitator to provide the update on the second issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Ecuador.
Thank you, Chair. Before continuing with our report, I just want to thank you, Chair, and all delegations for the collaborative effort and constructive spirit in our sessions. Big thanks also to the Secretariat team. Chair, I'll continue with our report. On the second issue that was referred to the group, namely identification of modalities for stakeholder engagement in the context of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee process and other documents, there was concern that although the draft outlined modalities in broad terms, it did not provide a basis for proceeding. Further, there was a view that the rich discussion in the plenary may have covered already the issue adequately. And as that discussion would be captured in the report, there seemed little purpose in the proposal. Mr. Chair, we are in your hands now. The group is prepared to continue its work if you so wish. Thank you, Chair.
I thank both co-chairs for their hard work. the work you have undertaken as co-facilitators, and all the representatives in the room have put into coming together with your joint outcome on the issues of recommended further work. I propose we accept your report on this matter, which will be included in the report of the meeting. On the second issue that was referred to the informal group, namely the identification of modalities for stakeholder engagement in the context of the INC process, I take note of the report of the co-facilitators. We had a rich discussion in the plenary on stakeholder engagement and action. When I deliver my final remarks shortly, I will summarize what I have heard in the order in which the items were taken up. Now, distinguished delegates, let me summarize for you what I heard from your interventions on agenda item 4. Over the past few days, discussing agenda item 4, I have been encouraged by the lively discourse occurring between member states and stakeholders, both within and outside of the plenary. It is clear that we have started to see areas of convergence in the development of the future instrument. Notably, many have confirmed their desire to have an instrument that addresses the full life cycle of plastics, protecting human health and the environment, with a special attention paid to the unique circumstances of those countries most in need. The discussions have indicated that many of you feel strongly that when determining the broad structure of the instrument, form follows function, and the core obligation, control measures, and voluntary approach that we agree upon in the future will ultimately shape the overall structure of the instrument. Many express the desire to ensure clarity in the objective and scope of the future instrument before moving toward discussions on more specific obligations under the instrument. Further, I have consistently heard the widespread recognition that national action plans will be also a critical component in ensuring the success of the future instrument. We have heard a consistent call to ensure that developing countries are able to actively participate throughout the entire process through adequate and predictable financial support. We have also heard many excellent interventions from a wide variety of stakeholders. Member states have continued to reiterate the desire to include all relevant stakeholders, particularly those in the informal sector, throughout the negotiating process. Further, many of you have expanded on the need to ensure strong monitoring and reporting mechanisms as part of the success of the future instrument, with a need to ensure that all parties will have requisite financial and technical support to enable effective reporting. It is clear that science and technology are seen as being central to the INC process and to the implementation of the subsequent instrument. Interventions pointed to the need to inform this process and subsequent implementation with the best scientific and technical input, either through a specific body established under the instrument or by processes initiated through the instrument. It was also clear that education and public awareness are critical for the success of our endeavors. On stakeholder engagement, encompassing all stakeholders in both the development of the instrument and in its implementation, it is seen as essential for the instrument's success. A range of modalities were proposed to facilitate targeted and timely input from stakeholders. I am informed by the Secretariat that synthesis report of the stakeholder dialogue will be made available in an in-session document today. On stakeholder engagement, after hearing the rich discussions in plenary and the informal group, I take note of all the views expressed and will work with the Secretariat to find modalities to ensure a strong stakeholder engagement on the process ahead. There seems to be overall convergence on the notion that with regard to the standard articles on final provisions, the overall form of these provisions will be necessarily informed by the form and function of the core obligations, control measures, and voluntary approaches that we agree upon as the instrument takes shapes. On the sub-item on sequencing, as I just mentioned previously, I have heard repeated recognition of the limited time frame for negotiations and the need for properly sequence effects and structure to ensure that financial and time resources are maximized. I have heard suggestions that we should pay particular attention to the intersessional work, possibly by forming contact groups on procedural and substantive matters. I also note that many contact groups would not be held in parallel so as to ensure maximum participation by those who may have limited resources to attend. Reassuringly, I have repeatedly heard the need to ensure that in developing and implementing this instrument, nobody should be left behind. Finally, we have heard the report of the co-facilitators of the informal group, and with your agreement, these proposals will be included in the report of this session. In addition, I will work with the Secretariat to set up modalities for intersessional work after the documents for INC-2 are published. So I see no objection. It is so decided. I give the floor to Pakistan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and co-facilitators for this discussion. Yesterday, we pointed out during the informal group discussions, and we mentioned that there is a need to put scope in the work. Objective and scope, that is very important to discuss this plastic treaty. So that is reflects still objectives and its obligation, but scope is still missing. We strongly recommend to put scope in this text, then it will be agreeable. Thank you.
Agradezco al distinguido representante del Pakistán y vamos a tomar nota de su observación. Sí. I think there is no more requests for the floor, so the committee has... I see China. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
谢谢主席。中国代表团感谢主席、共同协调员和秘书处以及各方在非正式工作组期间开展的工作。我们认为，公正、公开、透明的程序对文书谈判进程至关重要，确保各成员国充分表达意见，是达成有效包容的文书的重要前提。中国代表团想再次强调，谈判成果应是各方 经充分沟通之后达成共识的结果。在此基础上，中国代表团支持主席和秘书处工作，愿与各方一同努力，共同推进整体进程有效开展。此外，我们注意到会议网站已经上传了报告草案，各位代表从世界各地汇集于此，很多代表不远万里而来，克服路程的重重困难。我们希望各国在会议期间表达的观点能够充分反映在最后的会议报告中。谢谢。
I thank the distinguished representative of China. Veo, ha solicitado la palabra la distinguida representante de Cuba. Tiene la palabra.
Gracias, presidente. Cuba se une al reconocimiento del trabajo realizado por usted y por la Secretaría, la rapidez con la que también se han publicado los informes. Ahora, sobre el resumen que usted presenta, tenemos una pregunta adicional, quizás sea algún problema en la traducción, pero no nos queda claro el consenso que usted ha planteado sobre la creación de grupos de contactos para periodo intersesional. Tenemos entendido que las propuestas han sido para comenzar con estos grupos de contacto en el próximo INC. Y en el periodo intersesional, pues, que los países puedan presentar sus contribuciones, también las partes interesadas. Y bueno, también se habló del fórum, que quizás podría ser de manera virtual o no, si se toma esa decisión, pero lo que no nos queda claro es la creación de cualquier grupo de contacto que a nuestro juicio no debería ser de manera virtual. Los trabajos que se hagan en los grupos de contactos deben ser presenciales y por lo tanto, sea cual sea la materia que ellos vayan a discutir, favorecemos que esto sea propiamente en el próximo INC. Muchas gracias.
Agradezco a la distinguida representante de Cuba. Precisamos que no se trata de grupos de contacto para esta INC, sino para el proceso general, y las reuniones intersesionales que están previéndose no son negociaciones específicamente, sino son tipo de webinars, discusiones de este tipo relacionado con la preparación que hará la Secretaría para el INC-2. No veo otra solicitud de palabra. Ha solicitado la palabra el distinguido representante de Chile. Tiene la palabra.
Gracias, señor presidente. Mi delegación quisiera igualmente tener la oportunidad de agradecerle a usted y a la Secretaría por cómo se han realizado los trabajos durante este proceso de la INC-1. Y al igual que los distinguidos delegados de la delegación de China, nosotros también consideramos que los aportes que los miembros hagamos durante el proceso de la INC deben ser reflejados correctamente hasta el término de la sesión. Por lo tanto, en este sentido, quisiéramos, por un lado, que todas las discusiones y los reportes finales sean presentados una vez que se haya concluido el periodo de sesión y no antes del resultado del mismo. Respecto a la propuesta, señor presidente, nos queda la duda en el sentido del documento Final Proposals from the Co-Facilitators, ya que todavía hay unos brackets en las fechas. Entonces quisiéramos al respecto saber cómo se va a trabajar ese punto específico. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Le voy a dar la palabra a la Secretaría sobre este punto. Tiene usted la palabra, secretaria ejecutiva.
Thank you so much. So I actually will. The reason that the dates are in brackets is because we don't have an agreement. We don't have dates as yet for INC 2. But if we, I will just give you how we come up with dates. So if we have a meeting that starts on 22nd of May, we have to release the document 12 weeks ahead for editing and translation so that you are able to have the document 6 weeks ahead, which would be in April sometime. I think the second week of April, and therefore any submissions we would need from member states would be 7th of February, as you have decided that the submissions from stakeholders should be before that of the member states. I would think that the submissions from stakeholders should at least come in the first week of January. Again, this is just a schedule based on 22nd of May as the start of INC2. If INC2 is earlier, then we'll have to make the sessions, all of this much earlier then. So just an idea of how timelines are worked out. Thank you.
I thank the Executive Secretary. Maintenant, je donne la parole au représentant du Mali.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Nous saluons votre conduite des débats et l'excellent travail abattu par le secrétariat. Je viens en appui au délégué du Pakistan qui a souligné le manque ou la non-mention de la portée du futur traité. Ceci nous semble très important pour être exhaustif et pour ne pas nous cloîtrer sur la pollution plastique générale et celle en milieu marin. Nous voudrions une clarté sur la pollution terrestre et dans les fleuves, rivières et lacs dont nous disposons comme pays continental. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie les distingués représentants du Mali. I think now we have no more, so the meeting is adjourned. I repeat, the session is adjourned. We will follow the afternoon. Sorry?
We have to adopt
So, I repeat, we adopt agenda number 4. And now we will continue our session after lunch. The meeting is adjourned.